Well, thank you so much. Sorry to be attending virtually. Being a parent is amazing, but some of the least favorite things about it is getting germs. Thank you all for attending the May DAP. We do have one new face in the room. Sandeep is here, joining as our newest member, representing landscape architecture. So if everybody can say hi to Sandeep, that would be amazing. And we are being recorded today, and the setup for the meeting will be just a brief intro by me. I'm going to hand it over to the applicant for presentation, and then we can have the panel discussion. I don't believe we have any members of the public signed up to speak today. And then we can do next steps for this particular item. We only have one on the agenda, which is 7825 Strathmore Street. This project was just at the DAP earlier this year in February for its first site plan submission. And at that time, the panel had asked the applicant to return with a little bit more detail for three main items. The first of which is to update the landscaping by the lobby entrance to remove the vegetation and to replace it with a hardscape material. The second of which is to come back with a little bit more detail on the materials for the elevations and specifically provide some typical base sections for generally two material options. And then lastly, to provide an updated street section to show the relationship of the micro retention bios along Strathmore Street with the pedestrian sidewalk experience and the street buffer. And so the applicant submission did provide those three main things. We outlined that in the memo that went out last week. And then there are just a couple of things that I'd like to point out. And they made the revisions as we requested. They provided two material options. The choices being EFIS, or cementitious panels, which I believe is Nichicha, and I will let them clarify or correct how I just pronounced that. And then they provided the street section for the microbiome retention planters. And then just one thing I'd like to caution for the discussion today is that in this submission, there are a lot of improvements that the applicant is providing in the right-of-way area, so anything outside the property's boundary. And while it might be tempting to discuss that, and I think it's great to have comments, but I don't want the conversation to be centered around improvements in the right-of-way, because that is something that will be reviewed by our agencies. This particular application is already in for regulatory review, and the agencies are already starting to jump on these items. And so with those beginning items, I will go ahead and hand it over to the applicant for presentation. Thanks.
Great. Thank you. Great. Good morning. My name is Faik Tugberg. I'm with the Architects Collaborative. I met most of you a few times now. And I know that you all received the booklets of what we revised, but for the record, I'm going to go through it, albeit briefly, and then we can have discussion and questions and answers. Okay. While Grace outlined very clearly what we were asked to do at our last meeting, the ground floor layout, there are two site plan related issues, number one and number two. But the main issue for me is number two, which is the treatment of the facade section, facade materials, etc. Next one. And in each sheet, we've shown the before, after, as well as we put the remarks on it. I can't read that far, unfortunately. Starting on the top left, we've updated the hardscape right in front of the storefront by adding hardscape, eliminating some of the green. We've also, we sort of shifted the locations of the trees to make the circular expression more prominent. But we've had three issues. Excuse me for 1 second so I can back up. Two of them are site plan related issues, and the one was architecture, basically more details on the facade. And the packages we sent out, we've shown before and after, as well as identify the changes specifically on each drawing. I started on the top left side of the drawing on One Avenue, and we've revised the landscape by adding hardscape, removed most of the green. And also, we reshuffled the trees right around the front of the circular expression to give it a more prominent view at the street level. Also, in front of the entrance, we modified the surface material and that design. Moving to the right side, the opposite corner of the building, we've been working with our dry utility consultant, and we think we might be able to get the transformer location a little farther away from the building, which gives us some more space right by the pass-through. So we've taken advantage of that to add additional landscaping and other treatments. Next one, please. This is not something you asked for, but we felt that, I felt that we can improve the rear elevation. We added more balconies and sort of made it a little bit more uniform. You'll see it on the elevations. Next one, please. This is simply about the transformer volt location on the bottom right corner and the area that I mentioned previously. Next one, please. Okay. Elevations before and after. You can see the front elevation really at this scale, there is no discernible change. But when you look closely, you will see the joint lines, etc. Can you zoom out so we can talk about that? But we did make prominent changes to the rear elevation where we added more balconies, and I think it's more residential in appearance and gives people along that alley a little bit more of a relief on pretty much every unit. Next one, please. Okay, so here's the, as far as I'm concerned, meat of the discussion for today. The building you see on the left is a building that we designed, and it's built a very successful building on Arundel Mills Boulevard on the way to the Maryland Casino, and working with an installer for EFS. He brings a stove product, and after doing a lot of sort of on-site sampling, we came up with a surface material or a surface texture that is very, very mild. When you look at it closer, almost it's like sandy, but it's very smooth. There is no really sculpted texture or anything like that. And we think we can do this building in the same way. What we did on the building on the left side is that we didn't let the EFS touch the ground levels. The first two floors are all brick and glazing, etc. And then all the EFS material is started above grade. We work with the joining, the shape of the joints, and we think we can bring the same technique here and be successful. Couple of things about EAPS. Despite that it had some concerns 50 years ago or so, it's been addressed over and over again. I'm not selling EFS, but I kind of like the material because it gives you a thermal protection, insulation, and a surface finish all at once. And it's repairable, it's maintainable. My understanding is that the surface will be basically maintenance free somewhere between 20 to 25 years, and then requires probably cleaning and touch up, etc. So we felt that this could be an appropriate material, and you can see the jointing, etc. It's really not much different than previous jointing because we can provide these joints pretty much anywhere as long as we have a horizontal joint at the top of or movement. And you can look at the
But there's also a smoother texture. Well, yeah.
When we built the building, that texture was not available. So what we will do is we will actually build, if we decide to experiment with that, we will actually build life-size pieces, 8 foot by 8 foot or something, and then convince ourselves that it doesn't look holy, okay, in architectural terms. I know the other textured EFS looks pretty nice. Next one, please. I'm sure the next material you're familiar with, which is Nietzsche is a brand name, happen to have the samples, and we'll look for other ones, but looking at it, Nietzsche is a pretty good quality on them. And you can see these are cementitious materials. They're all compressed materials. Now, the key thing here is that we're avoiding, or we would like to avoid, surface mounted, where you can see the mechanical fasteners, like it's done on the first floor of this building. If you're walking along this facade, you can see the screw heads. We're not much fond of that, and I think the building, it will serve the building better, albeit a little more expensive. We would like to install this as a rain screen system. And as you know, that also has some pros and cons. The pros is that you get, you have to provide exterior continuous insulation. You get your thermal insulative values on that skin, and this is just an exterior surface treatment, and it can be repaired easily if it's damaged. So that's a positive thing, and I know that the ownership is concerned about that. They own a number of buildings, and that's one of their. So these are the two materials. There are many other materials, as you know, and we've looked at a lot of panels. The issue is they have different pricing, okay? And I mean, they range, as you know, anywhere from $25 a foot, or like you hear $12 a foot furniture, but that's really not the true cost of it at all. Okay, you're buying just the material, and then you have to provide the wall behind it. If you want to compare it brick with brick or EFS, you have to look at the whole cavity per square foot through the wall section. So we also found these, I haven't used it, but I've been looking at them, UHCP panels, which stands for ultra high performance concrete. I'm not promising anything, but I'm looking at the pricing of that. It's a wonderful material. Unfortunately, to bring the sample, but again, these are things that we look at all the time. But what we have on the table today are these two. I hope that you find these successful in this application. And I'm going to continue, and then we can come back. Next one, please. Next ones are just really iterations, but again, at the scale, really the jointing is what's making the difference. The feel of the building, you have to be there to get the feel of the surface texture, the reflections or lack thereof. Next one, please. Same kind of idea on the other elevations. Next one, please. Next. This is the benefit of this computer modeling. You just keep producing it. Okay. These are the streetscape revisions.
Yep.
Would you like to talk about it?
Sure. So we removed the grass or landscape panels along Woodmont Avenue, replaced it with some specialty paving. We would like to incorporate some type of banding to accentuate the architectural panels that are there at that large window, just to try to mimic the architecture, to blend. Yeah. The banding there, it correlates. Go back quickly to show the banding on the building. John, back one. Yeah. We'll see the banding at the streetscape. The bottom right. Want to
basically
mimic
the
that same
storefront
banding,
expression
right?
and the heavier.
And that blends into then the Bethesda streetscape paving as well. So we want to articulate that element at the base. We did adjust, and I think we removed one tree to help frame that view of that piece there on the left. Right, so we've got the two trees north and south, and then basically the large window area is framed by those trees. So that's the streetscape. And then if you want to go and look at the section, it shows you the relationship IO adjacent to the building, sidewalk area, the landscape zone, and then parking. Feel like it gives a nice feel to it. Bios, if you remember, were set up with the rhythm of the building architecture as well. We were really careful on the size of the bios so that they actually terminated at the building and not at a window, right? So that was very deliberate, just to help mimic the architectural rhythm walking down the street. And then in the corner, bottom corner by the amenity area, go back to the rendering. Because we're hoping the vaults to be moved into the right of way, we are able to add one more street tree or one tree along the street right there to help with that rhythm, and then also help frame the entrance through that thoroughfare and help give it some more context rather than it just be all paving, but it actually creates an entry feel to that area. So I think those are the elements that we addressed and updated.
Thank you. And that's the end of the presentation. So to questions, comments, shoot.
I think,
Go ahead.
I think these are great improvements. Given a little bit more breathing room at the corner of Woodmont and Strathmore, I think this is a good idea, the specialty paving. I noticed that on architecture, on the tower, have projecting mullions that gave more of a sculptural element. I actually like that, but if you had the before and after, when I was zooming in the image, that's probably a cost.
Also, just so many technical complications to make these things work. You know, we'd love to do other things, but
Yeah, absolutely. And I understand that. That's why we asked for more details and how it works with joints. And once you add those joints, the elevation, you realize that it actually adds a lot more scale, a lot more detail. Perhaps you don't need those projecting mullions.
I agree. I agree. My thing is that we would love to have at a design development phase and a design phase to get to the, so we're being forced to consider some of these things in advance, but
Very developed.
Yeah, it is what it is. So,
Very developed.
Yeah.
I appreciate the level of development that you provided in element, and especially side-by-side comparison, and the two options. In terms of, I see that there is something else going on the fold it out presentation. You used to have a trellis that was very uniform on the penthouse, and there are some programmatic differences or changes, sure, result right now. So that's different. I don't know if we actually going to be able to see that in reality, because
It's not shown on the other.
it's not shown on the other views, right? But these views are actually a little bit more of they're not true street elevation, street views. So that's why I'm saying you're probably not even going to see that from the street level. It's more of a bird's eye view, unless you are on the.
It's just how far
Can
back.
you call it out, the change? Because I don't think I
what
saw
change?
highlighted change.
It's
The penthouse.
tan color.
That's not the part of the building. I know that's,
Not the
sorry, that's.
Building, it's a
It's the
building
building
beyond.
behind.
Building
It's the
behind.
building behind. We didn't.
But
This is not you?
No,
that's-
it's the
Okay.
building.
I was wondering.
That's why
because
it's,
I kept zooming in on the, at the people.
I know,
that one.
right, and I'm
Okay.
looking at it.
Okay, thank you. So that's the Camille probably, that's the.
Yeah, it's,
Behind.
you know, this model is a complete model, so when you're
Yeah.
taking a shot,
That explains.
but that's,
Oh.
I'm kind of surprised. I was wondering what we changed, but
Yeah,
no, please focus on the drawing on the left side. That's the building.
yes. So in terms of options for the materials, right? I'm surprised to see if this as an option, because in my experience, this is a lesser quality material if you compare it to cementitious panels. Now, there are different cementitious panels, high density and not so high density. Nichiha is not high density, but it can look very expensive. And you mentioned that you don't want to see the fastness. That's the right way to do it. I think will make it look sharp, and especially with the number of joints that you're proposing here, and especially with the color scheme, which is very light, that shows every imperfection, right? I am curious about this new option that you mentioned, and you said this did not exist in EFIS when you were first considering these
The smooth surface,
at Milano.
yeah, the smooth surface. It
Right.
was, we actually looked at it at a hotel application, but I didn't like it. It was on a very early stage, but the sample looks completely different.
It does, yeah,
So, but you know, we don't make any decision without building a large size panel. I'm curious, the applier we use, is very good and he works with us. And frankly, I may have shared your views before we did the building in Aranco, but it truly changed my view of EFIS because it looked very sharp and it still looks sharp. The cost wise, EFIS may be more than Nichiha. Okay, when you look through the whole wall section.
Yeah.
So it's a decent material to use on a residential application over a long term because it comes with insulation and surface finish at the same time. So that's one of the benefits,
Yeah.
but I'd be happy with either one of them.
From what I understand, they're both complete systems and going for energy efficiency anyway, so there is.
Right.
But yeah, cost implications. We understand that. More traditional material and what builders are most familiar with and what's more cost effective is the Nichiha, is this cementitious panel. And I would feel more, I just haven't seen a building of that scale with EFIS in Bethesda downtown. So that's a little, it does look good. It just would be the first. I'm more comfortable.
Representing it as an option
Ah.
that we'd like to consider, you know, and frankly, I will look at other panels. That's why our submittal set says Nichiha or similar.
Yeah, cementitious panel, you don't.
I mean, we can look at a,
If I can interject just for a second. Part of the reason that we did propose the EFIS, because obviously material prices are moving around and we don't know where things are gonna be at the point in time when we go to construct. So we're just trying to leave ourselves some flexibility to make sure that, you know, the numbers will actually pencil, and the
Mhm.
project can be feasible if material costs change.
if the aesthetics go through, Nichiha may be an expensive material. So
Yeah, I was just surprised to see EFIS and
What is your preference?
it's, yeah.
If you had your choice, which one?
I would probably use a cementitious panel. And that's why I'm even reluctant to name names because I'd like to have a chance to negotiate, you know, bring it in, sit down with the ownership and weigh the cost. We developed a very decent chart of cost comparisons, but again, those are academic when you do it at this level. We put material and installation, but you're not really getting, you can only get a reasonable comparison. it doesn't mean you're gonna get it at that price, so. We will
Terms-
look at it and see which panel can offer us a good finish at a reasonable cost.
I
This
s-
is EPIS on the screen?
Yes. It's very striking. I mean,
I think it appears totally different with the new texture.
Yes,
Is that one of those textures there?
Yes, this is the fine.
this is the fine texture.
the white,
that one?
oh,
It
it's
would be even smoother, probably choose something much smoother.
And for the EPIS, can you commit to that finish at least?
Yeah,
Yeah.
no problem. If it's, we can commit to that finish, the shiny finish, I don't know, because I haven't.
Yeah, we would have to see that built because, when it gets shiny, you can see all the imperfections.
So
saying
I'm pointing to the, what's the one to the right of that?
Milano.
Yeah, Milano.
that's the one.
Yeah, I would like to see
Calling that
that.
shiny?
Well,
This is
the fine
a
texture.
very frank discussion. We had him build a pretty tall wall, like a 2-story wall, and it was at a very early stage. And it was a darker color. What happens is you get the surface variation, so it reflects. That's why I would love to use that if they convince me that it's uniform. Now, at a lighter color, you can get better uniformity.
I like the texture and I see what you were going for. For example, competitor, not Equitone is a cementitious panel. It's high density. It's much more expensive than Nichiha. So a lot of the times Equitone gets VE to Nichiha. But the finish on EPIS, that Milano finish, is very close to Equitone. So I see the texture that you were going for.
Yeah.
I like it very much. Because it's new, I haven't seen that texture installed
I can't
anywhere.
commit to it, but I'll
Yeah.
promise we'll study it carefully. I don't want to put anything on the building that's gonna strange, okay?
And at this stage,
Just one last thing. I also appreciate that you raised the canopy at the main entrance, that
I forgot to mention that, yes.
better proportions opens up that entry. I think it's a positive change. And the wall sections now, we'll see now that you are doing the podium with the stick build. I see wood trusses, all makes sense. And also, it also affected where your joints are going. This is
Right,
enforced. I appreciate it. Thank you.
thank you.
So I think the material is related to the design of the building. So if you could zoom in on one of these images and just look at how much detail and how many corners you're going to need to make in the material and how it'll all come together. I think it's a very complex exterior. It's articulated to a very high degree. There's a lot of exterior corners, a lot of joints. So if we just think about the two material options, in EPIS, it would all be uniform, right? It would be volumetric. It wouldn't be corner joints. If you take any of the corners and you think about how you would construct it with a panel system, what would the detail of joints? Well, yeah.
That you have choices, you also get a corner, you can get a corner piece in some of them.
A pre-made corner?
Okay, some of them.
And Nietzsche, how can you get a pre-made?
Um,
Because you have,
Not
one thing
sure.
you have a lot of are corners.
No, these are all great
Yeah.
points, okay? I mean,
I'm
we
just
share
trying
the
to
same
say that
view.
I think
But-
select a material, it should relate to the building that you've designed.
I
So
appreciate
let's
it.
pick the best material. for this.
So when you go to a rain screen type of application, you can come up with a very thin joint at that. Okay,
Open joint.
open joint. So that's what it would be. If you do mechanically fast the surface, then you sort of eliminate that open joint. But you're buying into.
So if you were to use EPIS, would all of the white be EPIS?
Yes,
Even the balconies?
yes. What I would do is we cut those sections so that we're certain. We use like a metal channel, like a U channel, and then we will insert the panel with an EPIS finish within that.
But you'd see EPIS on the.
You would see EPIS.
And
Yeah,
in each panel system, they'd be pieces of panel.
we would do the same thing, but there's a real railing system behind it. A U channel that's supporting the railing. The U can accommodate whatever finish we want to run along that.
The vertical elements that are shown here, are these,
No, those are mullions, aluminum. and-
Oh, no,
these?
yes,
the
that is
verticals-
supporting, some of the wood up there.
Is it
um,
steel? Is it painted steel? Is
uh,
it wood? Painted wood?
You know, I'm not
Not sure
sure.
yet. Okay.
Well,
But
it's probably
The reason I'm asking is.
there may be steel posts in it. Yeah, yeah.
And the material that's gonna wrap this building, it will speak to the ultimate success of it. So just trying to think
I
through
agree.
which material option would be better for this highly articulated. To be out of steel. But won't be. So I'm just thinking through what the options are. In terms of what choices you've presented. That's why I was curious which one you would prefer to finish detailing.
A frank answer. EFS is easier.
Yeah.
The panel will be,
More pieces, more joints.
and, you know, we'll do a lot more drawing and understanding and dealing with, but look, we've done many buildings and
Yeah,
we're
yeah.
not afraid of doing the work. And if it's gonna carry our name, we're gonna make sure this looks.
Yeah.
But beauty is in the eye of the beholder, so we'll be.
Thanks.
David or Sandeep, did you guys want to add comments?
I do have a question.
You can go ahead.
Well, I did try to catch up to the, previous submittal, spent some time yesterday looking through it. So I think it's a great package and it's a great building, like you mentioned. From a landscape perspective, what I didn't see a lot of was kind of a narrative which talks a little bit about the hardscape materials that are going on the ground and how it relates to the building. The rhythm of the stormwater planters is really good, so I noticed that. And so the question is that they square footage is that the reason why they
Yes.
are as big as they are?
Yes.
And but then when I look at the railing on it, like how does that tie back to what is the thinking behind? And then when you get to the corner as well as also the on the other side, there's 2 or 3 materials that I'm seeing simultaneously. And I understand that you try to highlight certain aspects. So if you could just help me understand what the thinking behind what the material selection will be, and something that will be.
So the paving, we're still at an early stage, waiting really for the architectural materials to be chosen so that we can really blend in and accentuate the architectural materials with the paving. So for us, it's a little premature. That's why if you screen in Chong at the very corner.
This one?
Yeah, where we were trying to show that there's going to be some type of banding, right? Just to accentuate. Now, what that banding is made of and what the material is, we're not sure yet, but that's what we want to highlight and use. You can also see we then shifted the material at the front entry. And you can see where you actually turn and go to the main. Yeah, there are 2 different material types. One is to just identify that that's the entrance. So we want a different material paving versus the accentuation of the architecture and the banding. So that's why you see the 2 different pieces on that end. With your questions on the railing, that is to be further developed as well. We were
Which
showing
railing are we talking about?
the railing around the bios, right?
Mhm.
So once again, these bios are regulated by a different agency. The height of the railing is determined by what the agency requirements are going to be, the depth.
Yeah.
So right now, this is kind of a best guess as to what it could be.
I think the height is good. I think I'm more concerned about the color, overall design. It just seems like an afterthought that it somehow isn't speaking to. And it is
I
going
think
to
We've
be.
looked at
materials-
number of railings. This is a
You have to have
representation of,
Yeah,
Yeah.
well,
it may have to.
we're debating,
For what?
we're debating.
The fall zone from the sidewalk down
Does it
to,
go lower than that?
Not,
Lower,
You have
lower
to
than
have
30
this
inches,
as a-
then you have to have a,
Lower than what?
it is an ongoing debate.
like on that side.
I think this is
But
highly
what are you falling?
illustrative.
What are you
Yeah.
falling?
So the,
Rather not
So-
have.
right,
Push to not have them.
we do, we
Okay.
do all the
Yeah.
time. Because one, they don't want the expense,
Yeah.
and two, but they're calling it public safety and they require it when we go through to get the permits. Right, we're at the permit stage is when we find out what the height
Yeah.
of the railing is.
And
We
whether
can't
you-
dictate it.
Most of these in the county. Absolutely there.
Mhm.
Right,
Yeah, so-
right.
Why won't you try it without it? Just see what they say.
We do. We do. But I don't want to show something that say there's not a railing, then come back and there's a railing and you guys say
Oh,
railing.
I see.
So
either way.
I'd rather
it
show
would be
you
a-
worst case. I'd rather show you worst case
I don't understand.
and take the railing away.
And that's
Then-
not even gonna be decided by the time they get to
Yeah,
the
yeah.
planning board, like
No.
that after.
Your point is
planning
But
board.
it's
How does it-
way-
Yeah,
We will find a contemporary looking railing. not,
Yeah.
Sort of, it's a representation.
because I did see, the planters have been raised a little bit to sort of kind of create a feature out of them,
Exactly.
which is interesting.
It's intentional,
Yeah,
right?
intentional. I also appreciate the regular planters in between.
Right.
Because everything that I've seen around here, like these stormwater planters do not look good. And they do stretch along the entire length of the building. And everything that's happening in the building, material wise and everything, it just seems like you look at the bottom and that's where things kind of start.
Right.
So I don't know if you've had any experience where you to address the edge of these planters a little different from the inside, where at least you kind of have something which is a little bit more reliable, a little bit more kind of consistent
Sure.
versus inside, because I know with the soil media, the drainage happens really quick and there is a lot that you can do.
So we will look to see if there's any kind of treatment that we could do to that precast, because it's basically a precast basin, right?
Mhm.
What kind of treatment we can do with the precast to give it a little more architectural quality than just a precast look. So we're always looking for opportunities to do that.
What about the edge condition of where you're showing the seating?
Yeah,
Is
so
the
let's-
intent to, like, who's using that space? Because I know the benches are kind of providing seating for people who are basically circulating in both directions.
So, right, so the darker gray is to accentuate that is the through block connection. The lighter tan is to accentuate more of a passive area that residents and even the public can congregate and use. So we've got tables and chairs on the lower end outside of the canopy of the building. Then under the canopy of the building are artful seating areas that we want to use as credit for artful seating as far as one of the public benefit pieces. So that's what those.
What material?
So those are made by, I think, Forms and Surfaces, and it's a,
It's a pre-manufactured.
yeah, pre-manufactured. Different colors, they can come in, they can come lit, if we want them lit. But it creates more of an artful looking way to sit, and it actually becomes engaging as well, the way that.
Can I just confirm what you're saying? So you want public art points for that?
Not public art. So there's a public points for artful seating that we actually get credit for,
For the rec guidelines or for public benefit?
public
points?
benefit.
Stephanie, can you confirm this? I've never heard of this and I'm updating this whole menu.
Okay.
Wait,
on-
yeah, can you say this one more time for me? What exactly are you?
Public benefit points for artful art seating with art integrated with it?
Like public art?
No.
This definitely
seating-
sounds a little bit more recreational.
Yeah, I don't,
Could be.
there's a
it's-
public
I,
art
I think that's what it is.
Might be a
one,
rec-
which has to go through the actual process. So
Yeah,
that,
we don't,
that's different than, and
Then it's-
that's the public benefit that, so I don't
then
think
it's
that's
the
what you guys are talking
recreation
about.
point.
Okay.
Recreation
Rec
points.
Oh, no, I just want to clarify,
Artful
Yeah,
seating.
thanks, Atul.
the
Category.
rec guidelines is a separate thing. We can do that if that's an option, but if you're asking for public benefit
Yeah.
points, public art,
It's,
it's like a whole other
Right.
animal.
I don't
We
think. this would
appreciate
be
it for the rec guidelines
Yeah.
though.
right.
Is there programming inside the building adjacent to this space? Spill out for people? Is there an area, an amenity space or something next to this that people would be spilling out from?
So it's interesting, this
Or
connects
is it
to
units?
so we also have bike racks down in the lower left. If you were to come out, there's two ways to come out of the bike area. One is the top left arrow.
Yeah.
Could onto the alley. The other is this bottom arrow here. So the thought is if you have friends over, whatever, they could park their bike and you bring your bike out, or there's some interaction. But it's really more, I don't think there's really any amenity.
So who's using the space here, do you think?
I similar questions.
Yeah.
For my money, I would have more green.
Mhm.
Okay, now this is facing south, so we can't really put trees along the edge because it's gonna just make the pass through darker, in my view. But now that the transformer is gone, I would probably, incorporate more green even here and here. I'm not sure how many people are gonna get to be sitting there.
So if you're
So
walking by it, it's nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it just needs to be a
Yeah.
pleasant
I was just
space to
thinking about
walk
who's gonna
by.
be using the furniture.
I was envisioning like the residents going out there with their laptops, on a nice day.
Yeah, work, and
Yeah.
where are they? Are they?
Well,
are
we
they
have
adjacent?
we have an exit right there that
Yeah.
comes out.
What's directly to the left? Is it parking or units and?
Over here?
Yeah, right inside there.
There's a unit here and there's like a pet
We-
spa here.
And we have a way to get out right to the pass. So
I
That,
think that's
Dog
more-
art furniture.
That's
Is that a benefit point?
Yes.
I think that's where I was headed to. The edge condition is because for somebody to be actually able to use a space, especially for somebody who's working. I mean, it's a nice space to be because it's a benefit to be able to get outside of your home and be, outdoors. But I think the edges need to be treated in a way where you can actually facilitate that sort of space usage. It's welcoming, it's comfortable, understand the tree. And I know you've added one tree already, but I think it just wants to be integrated a little bit. Considering the edges that are coming from, the rest of the street and how it's ending and sort of connecting to what's happening in it. So it just seems like that area just needs to be looked at. And are these planters stormwater as well, or are these?
No. They're decorative.
And is there like a height difference between, is that like a raised planter?
Could be. We haven't determined yet it's over structure, so we've got to look at that, study that a little bit.
so that neighborhood right now, there's definitely a need for people to be outside.
Yeah.
And
No, that's
very
great part of the
often
street
during, on
activation.
weekends, I see people come out on their front lawn.
Mhm.
And it's a multifamily right now, and they, spread out with their blankets and they work or they're with kids. Very nice, it's very sunny. So there's definitely a need for a seating area, and people will be sitting there working on their laptops. And if you see adjacent to it, right, there's this front lawn area, so those neighbors will be out.
Yeah.
And the people living in this new building will be very jealous of that outdoor space.
Is it public? It is public. Right?
Yeah.
This
It
is
is
public.
Yeah, it's all public.
Looking at this intersection here, if you could zoom in just a little bit more. So this is a landscape planter. This is the entrance really, or defining the seating area to show and basically explain to people that it is public. They can come from the street. So we kept this open intentionally. And then this is the actual through block that we wanted to define. So we wanted to create two different spaces to help draw people in and over to this space, right? And then you've got the overhang coming through and doing this, right? So we could add some niches if you'd like, right? Or play off of this pillar here. But, that's
And if we bring some more lawn, I like green. I don't like white, big hard surfaces, but it's
I mean, I think you could increase the landscape just a little bit.
Yeah.
I mean, that opening, I believe, is 8 feet already.
I mean, it's nice to have the seating area, but
Correct.
I would love to be surrounded by trees, but if we do that, we're gonna cast too many shadows, so.
Because you want to feel like you're protected,
Yep.
like cars.
No, I agree. I agree.
So I think
We're
that
gonna
would privacy too. I would really encourage bringing that in and just, I mean, I think the framing to the space is really nice, but it just makes it too wide. And I'm looking at the tree right here. I know there are like 3 plants in there, but I think it just needs a little bit more. Also, just to extend that, pattern that you have on the other side. The walkway.
Okay.
She's looking at the street.
I'm looking here. So I'm just looking at, this area and then it kind of losing its integrity a little bit. This is fairly open already and, people can really sort of go in and utilize the space. But that edge is very important.
Right.
For the space to be reused. And to your point, I think street activation is very important there. To that work.
So that is not showing the tree in that location, which would, I think.
I can see it. I see it's like screened back a little bit, so I'm definitely visualizing.
So, I know we are getting up on time. David, did you want
Few things.
to share some thought?
I wanted to echo the appreciation for raising the awning. I think that helps a lot. Combined with eliminating the grass. Like, it belongs in space a little better to me. I had a couple of questions. So one of the things going to the material from the Rundle Mills building that you were showing, the windows on that building to me look like they're almost flush with the panel. And I guess I perceived that on this building that you're showing us that there was going to be a bit more of a recess. And I was curious whether that's.
we can vary that with these.
4-inch depth.
Yeah,
Oh, is this 4 inches?
it's a 4-inch depth, yeah.
Did not look that much.
But just for information, you can vary that. Ephes is, we don't want it too thick, but it's very easy to make it another 1/2 inch thicker or an inch thick.
We went from 4-inch to 2-inch in some instances to.
That's what okay, because it just looked flatter than I was perceiving this building to be, and I wondered if that was like a function of the panel system that was.
Yeah,
Okay.
right here, we went from 4 to 2-inch back to 4.
Let's see. So here's a question. I'm thinking this is perhaps not an issue because my designer colleagues didn't mention it, but on the first couple floors, you've got sort of a stone band at the bottom of the building, and then it goes to brick, and then it goes to panel. And the brick somehow, I was curious sort of why that transition. It feels possibly a little, the brick to panel seems a little discordant to me. And I was curious, I'm not talking on this building.
You're looking. We already built this.
It doesn't stand out a lot in what you're showing us because the colors all sort of blend together, but the
Elevation.
yeah, I was curious about
Why
that.
don't you
and it
go
just
to
sort
an
of, like,
elevation,
adds
let's see
this
what.
material change that seemed unnecessary and possibly unhelpful. And again, the brick, that texture, I'm not sure goes with the panel in my mind. So I was.
You mean the
curious
brick
about
texture?
that. Again, I'm telling you what my reaction.
No,
is.
I'm trying to
Yeah, that's
figure
what
out.
I mean, the brick texture. First of all, again, just sort of a material change that seems not to add much. And again, it seems like it's probably, if you listen to me over time, I'm going to be sort of like asking a lot of questions like, why can't this be simpler? It seems unnecessarily complicated to me. It's curious what the thinking was behind it.
Why have brick at the base, for example?
Brick at the base, the base is,
The first 2 levels.
is it granite on the base?
Well, no,
No,
there's
the first
granite, there's a
2 levels,
course of
yeah.
granite like at the very base, but then the first 2 floors, that's brick, is it not? On those
Yes,
columns?
yes, it is.
Okay. My question is sort of what is the thinking about that? And I guess I want to invite my colleagues
Well,
to
Why the material
comment
change?
on like whether that's helpful or not helpful.
I remember we had this conversation last time,
Yeah.
and the reason
Yeah.
for brick is that if you do a metal panel or EFIT, or cementitious panel, you cannot take those materials all the way to the ground for practical reasons. And granite is at the base because you have a ton of bioretention planters, bioretention for practicality. How are you going to maintain? It's not brick. Brick is too porous, right?
No, I guess I was wondering why it wasn't, say, granite up.
Well, probably cost.
Price.
Yeah.
But color,
Color is a good
you
question.
have a good
Yeah.
point on color, right? Because now if we have a very, very stark white Milano finish, yeah, you're gonna have to select brick that complements or contrasts, so it looks good, right? Looks sharp. But that's something that
We'll play with the brick
yeah.
colors once we have material selection. Brick comes in million colors. Maybe we'll go a little darker and just make it more prominent. I think maybe the colors are blending
but
too much.
almost like which scheme are you going for in terms of color? Is it contrast or is it complementary?
Yeah,
I'm working on a project right now and we are about to start construction and the white brick is out of production. So we are going through various colors of white brick. It's approved
right.
in concept that it's white brick, but there are different shades.
A bunch of white.
So here, again, you have a very valid point. Is it gonna be in the gray tones? Is it contrasting or is it complementary and white? They're still not gonna look the same because
I
this
think
is bright white.
Not contrasting.
I think
Okay.
that's good.
Yeah.
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 Because you already have the two types of, you didn't talk about it, but my assumption is even if you do the EFIS, the secondary upper material will stay a panel system, right? You have two
Yeah,
colors.
But yeah.
So there's four materials.
Right.
That wooded grain thing to me has a similar thing of sort of being, it to me, it's neither contrasting or complementary. It's just sort of, for me, it's puzzling. I don't,
Well-
it feels very discordant to me. And again, and it has this sort of, yeah, it's just puzzling. I agree. I think it's better if things are either more contrasting or more matching. This feels sort of like an in-between, that feels like it's sort of an afterthought.
Like, do you have any?
Well, that's what I would do. I mean, I understand. I appreciate the comments. The only part that kind of sticks out to me is at the penthouse level. I will get rid of that and it will become like the rest of the building. Okay, that's what, because elsewhere it's reasonably well integrated. We will study further.
It
but-
appears, although it's hard to see, that it's all the
Yeah.
alcoves or all the balcony interiors are lined with something like that rather than white.
Is that true?
For me, the challenge was, because of this cantilever of this building, that a different material, kind of extracted out of the main mass.
That's understood. I don't think that's being questioned.
Question sort of what does the inside of the balconies look like? On some of the images, it sort of looks like
What do you have?
I think it's all
Perspective? Which back?
Is it all glass?
Is it glass behind the balconies?
It's glass.
but the walls on the side of either side of the
take a look.
balcony.
Those would be white.
Those would be white? Okay,
Yes.
okay.
And
'Cause-
then the.
But maybe they're not.
passageway-
They're not
No,
shown
not.
that way, actually.
They're shown as a color,
yeah, that's why I was.
Yeah. which is in shadow and exists.
It's a secondary layer that's running through the building. So I think that's a reasonable concept. No.
I mean, it's I don't know, I find it, I'm just telling you my opinion, so you take it as you
know,
want, but it
I hear you.
feels like it's, a very major sort of break in form for sort of from the approach. Okay. So this is something that hasn't come up and so this is the last thing, so thanks for everybody for bearing with me. There's that off of the round end of the building. There's that sort of tail that sort of comes out over the roof of the where the building goes back to being rectilinear. And I was curious about that. It feels like I assume there was just you needed to sort of resolve that circle somehow. To me, that again feels like it's not consistent with sort of a building that consists of sort of being very rectilinear with this one round element, and then that little tail is this sort of little.
You talking about the upper level swoop that goes?
The upper level swoop, yes.
Upper level swoop.
Yeah, it has this sort of like little, it's the,
Yeah.
you know, it feels like another break in form of the building that, and a sort of detail that adds a kind of complexity without, but in a way that, I don't know, it doesn't.
I thought-
I was curious if that building, if that piece of the building might not be better just.
I thought it was a very good point counterpoint design element that kind of gives it kind of tension between the two rectilinear elements and the curvilinear elements.
Do you have a better view of that? Because from here, I can't tell which is your building and which is.
Oh,
I know this is.
sorry, I
Aerial or roof?
have that. Let me see. If I could-
Because you really don't see that.
I mean, you'd see it from some distance, it's from
Yeah.
other
Up high.
surrounding
Yeah,
buildings more
yeah.
so, yeah. It's not a huge issue, it struck me as kind of again, yeah, you've got like that rather pure circular form and then the rather pure rectilinear form of the building. And then this little exuberant tail
Mhm.
That doesn't seem to fit with that length. The other one is sort of quite simple. So.
Is there a roof plan?
No.
I think, my experience in being in Bethesda is some of these sort of elements of buildings at the tops of them are becoming a little there's a lot of activity and a lot of it doesn't sort of fit with the surroundings. So my view is sort of keeping things simpler is better for what's to come around it.
Are you doing a central system or VRF?
Here,
VRF?
And so if you go to sheet 14 and zoom into the circular corner.
On the presentation.
Yes.
today's presentation, sheet 14.
To the one before.
Right.
So if you zoom into that, the intersection of Woodmont and Strathmore.
Should zoom in. Good.
Yeah, so I think one more critique I have for this area is then that the paving is sort of trying to imitate or trying to reflect on the ground what's happening. But I think the canopy is a very strong element of the building, which is very interesting that it's not symmetrical, it's like asymmetrical, so it kind of extends out. But then when I'm looking at the ground plane, there's a paving that's accentuating the entry and everything else like that. Doesn't seem to be any sort of, intention of how that canopy comes in, and if that shape and form kind of relates to what's on the ground, and if there's a kind of a stronger story. Because it seems like there are two things happening, and there's a third thing. But there's ways to sort of again put it together and show the building.
I would look at the canopy as the exceptional element in this sort of the universe where the mullions are copied on the ground level.
But actually the structure of the canopy, the members are
Ties to the,
with the mullion, so it does kind of tie into the striping.
I think it would be really nice to see that form.
Yeah.
Show up.
but aside from that, we want the canopy to be the exceptional element when you're looking at this at the ground level.
I mean, I think it's the composition, between, so I think just seeing that, and then you kind of like, as somebody who's walking by, you kind of look at a font and you sort of become curious as to what's happening. So it's sort of that conversation you have with the built environment around you. I think that would add a lot to generally the like all the questions.
So the pavers mimicking the canopy.
Yes. So if you were to extend the paving treatment that you have in the street to sort of bring that curve onto the ground as well, and then have the second material come in, I think it'll just make it very interesting.
I hear you. I understand what you're saying. What I will do working with our consultant is really, I'm more into uniformity of materials. I would like to have the front door material continue with the banding in it rather than having two different things, and just simplify it a little
I
bit.
think simplification.
Yeah. And I think I'm not fond of that break, but you know, we respect each other's work and we'll work together. But the fact that we're going to have a special paver there that is different than the sidewalk paver, I think that's what we're promising.
The complexity of this project has certainly led to a lot of discussion that typically we don't have on other projects. But I think after the last meeting, the question was, can this even be done? And so I think that's, almost like a yes or no at this point from the experts, does this kind of get us to a point where we think it could be done or not? And then I think Grace probably wants to try to wrap this up on points. So I don't, what do you guys think, at least on that regard? Have we gotten to a point that we're comfortable?
It's a yes for me. If
So couple of things, just we want to make sure we get out of the DAP, and maybe Grace, you want to cover what the options are for next steps?
Yeah, so if the DAP feels comfortable voting today, we can move forward with that. But it does seem like there were some comments that were brought up about some finalizing of design elements and landscaping in the through block area and this canopy area. So if we want to explore those items further, I can give you some options as to how to address that. What we could do, what we've done before is if the DAP has particular detailed comments, we could have those items addressed through our regulatory process and staff could review that, so long as you give us enough direction to really be able to make that determination. But if you're ready to move forward without those items being addressed, I just need to get a feeling of as to where you guys are at. I know Yulia said you're ready to vote. And we do have comments from John Schitter, and he also appreciated the changes and that he is also supportive of the 20 points. And the improvements are positive. So I can just sort of stop there and see how other members feel.
We being asked to approve either EFS or Nichiha, is that the request from?
Yes, so that we can maintain flexibility to try to make a project economically feasible.
I would encourage the architects to feel free to simplify things as they move forward with one of those choices and respond in the design and detailing of the building according to the material, because I think it's going to be very challenging to pull off this building with those materials. So in my opinion, you have flexibility to simplify going forward. That's my recommendation, but that's how I think. It's going to be challenging. I think you're going to a lot of skill, and feel free to simplify to pull the detailing. It's going to be hard. Yeah.
I think maybe you want to say not specifically Nichiha, but cementitious panel, so
Yeah,
that you have more options.
A generic panel system.
Yeah.
I think you can do it.
Yeah.
Not tied to a specific
Fewer
manufacturer.
joints, cleaner. It's going to be challenging.
Give us time to explore. Some of these panels come with a
Yeah.
size. That's what you're seeing, size limitations.
And then the
So-
applicant is requesting 20 points, so I just want to make sure that it would be supportive of 20 points for either of the material options while you guys are discussing.
Grace, I just want to, so my preference would be that we approve and that the staff through the site plan process try to sort of mine some of the concerns that have been raised. But Grace, I don't know that I totally understand how that process works. So I don't know if you need to hear more from people for that, but I think I don't get the impression that coming back here is gonna give us much more insight into how the building is gonna look.
Agreed.
So typically when it's happened in the past, it's been one or two particular elements that the DAP wanted to see further realized, and that could be like a landscaping comment similar to what Sandeep was saying earlier about more integration of landscaping in the open space area. And we could sort of more thoroughly like work on that comment if that was something that the DAP wanted to definitely have integrated into the site design as we move through the process. It was another comment. I think the one that makes it more difficult for us to review is like the materials one, because I don't think the panel, like I didn't hear an overwhelming move to change the granite, brick, and upper materials in a certain way, but correct me if I'm wrong. But it could be something.
That's
like
what I heard. No, I think I got schooled on that, so that's fine.
No, it's everybody's learning.
Yeah, so we could review the drawings for the landscape and the integration of the paving materials and that little corner to have more green and softscape. We can also make sure that the streetscaping around the main entry kind of aligns with some of the discussions. I think staff feels pretty comfortable doing that, but it's like,
Is that like a condition of approval? Is that how it's?
yeah, we would essentially write it out as a condition that at site plan, you're working with us to finalize the details, right, Grace? I mean, that's,
Well, just if I can clarify, one thing that we tried to do with our timing was to get this meeting to happen around the time that we're going to go to DRC. So in the site plan and preliminary plan review process, there's going to be a resubmittal. The initial plans are in, they've been accepted. DRC, I think, is next week. So there will be a resubmittal to address the agency comments. And the thinking was to get some efficiency, cleaning up things as far as the design and the DAP comments go with that resubmittal. So, I think, Grace, this could come in, and I think I've seen it come in as sort of staff comments with the DRC overall comments, and then we can work to address those with our next submission.
Yes, it's quite timely actually, because our comments are due at the end of the week. So we could literally just pick up these comments, I'll put them into e-plans and you guys can review them. And our preference is it gets resolved in the regulatory process before planning board approval.
Yep.
So to Sandeep's comment, it wouldn't be a condition of the site plan approval at the planning board. It's a condition that we work
Of
through
the
the
DAP.
regulatory process
Yeah,
before
I
it gets
just,
there.
yeah, I want to be very clear. It's still something that the DAP is asking and requiring them to do for these points, Chris. So understand that. So even though you are going through the site plan right now, the letter is going to say that the DAP is recommending approval of the 20 points with X, Y, and Z needing to be done.
Yep,
And then
understood.
that gets done through the site plan process, review process.
Right. Yeah, we're on the same page. I was just clarifying that versus conditions of the site plan approval.
so with that, I think the question at the table is 20 points, the right points, knowing that it may be either of the two materials. And it sounds like the DAP might vote on this today. That's good.
Yeah, I'm good with 20.
Can you put the 20 in context again, Grace? What does that mean in terms of relative to other projects, and what do they get with 20 points? Does that help with your scorecard?
Yeah, so
Is it critical to
Public
your-
benefits, yeah.
Yeah. It's
yeah,
critical to
generally it
your
ranges from
achievement of-
10 to 30 points.
We have a little cushion, but it would help make sure that we have the ability to get through.
Yeah, it usually ranges a minimum of 10, maximum of 30. The 30 is a singular design that exemplifies the highest intent of the design guidelines. 20 points is generally a superlative design that in a uniquely compelling way meets the design guidelines or overcomes a significant site or similar constraint. And 10 points is generally consistent with the design guidelines. We have, I mean, if this is something that you're moving towards, we have gone to, in fives. So you could go down to 15 or up to 25. That's your choosing. But we stay in increments of 5. We're not going to the 2-point level.
If it helps with this discussion, we can commit to a cementitious panel. I mean, if you feel that's going to increase the chances of success.
Really?
It's good doing.
Says the architect.
I'm going to pay for the difference.
Exactly.
I would not commit to that because you will, how it points.
They're going to have
The
to
option.
find me overseas.
Articulate, I think the ambitions of the project should
Say again.
the ambitions of the project should be rewarded. I think you're working very hard to develop.
Yeah,
So I'm okay with the 20.
all right.
Oh, and Sandeep still hasn't voted. So
That's-
Oh, I'm sorry. I
one
can't
vote.
see.
But I'm okay with 20 if we, if the team can stop them. So more integration, more conversation with the building, just bringing it all
I
together.
understand.
It's a lot of work, and more work ahead. I think it's a beautiful building.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. I will get these notes up and you'll see them also at DRC.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.